Okay, let's start right at the beginning. What actually is rent-to-rent? And more importantly, how do people make it work when they start from scratch? Because you'll hear so many different contrasting opinions on this strategy. Some people swear by it, others say it doesn't work, it's risky and it's illegal. So in this video, I want to explain two things. In plain English, what exactly is rent-to-rent, walk you through the exact steps on how to do it properly, and also talk about the real risks so you're not going in blindly. This isn't hype, it's clarity. So at its simplest, rent-to-rent is exactly what it sounds like. You rent the property with the landlord's permission and you operate it in a way that generates more income than you're paying out. You don't own the property, you control it. That's exactly why a lot of people start with rent-to-rent, especially if they don't have a big deposit or they don't want to buy a property straight away. So for example, instead of buying a property and spending all that cash to put a deposit down and to actually close the deal, instead it's probably a better strategy to rent the property and operate it as a short stay accommodation, or even rent it room by room where it's appropriate. The gap between what you pay the landlord out in rent and what you make from Airbnb and booking.com is your profit. That's the model in its simplest form. So let's make this real. Let's say you rent a property for £800 a month. You then operate it on a short-term basis and put it on platforms such as Airbnb and booking.com, and the property generates £2,000 to £3,000 in revenue in the month. Now out of that you've got costs, obviously. You have cleaning, you have utilities, you have maintenance, and even your management systems. Now what's left after all of that is your margins. And typically people are making around £1,000 to £2,000 of clean profit per month, and you've done that without even owning the asset. That's exactly why people are attracted to it. This is where a lot of people actually get confused. Can rent-to-rent be illegal? Yes, 100%. And that's where the horror stories come from. But the model in itself isn't illegal. Big companies do this all the time. Hotels rent buildings, corporate accommodation providers rent their stock. Even most of the well-known brands that you spend money on a daily basis don't own any of the buildings they operate out of. The difference is structure and permission. If you try to do this quietly on the wrong contract with no consent, you're asking for problems. If you do it transparently, professionally, and have a corporate let agreement in place, it's a very lucrative business model. Here's why most people fail at rent-to-rent. They don't fail because the strategy doesn't work. They usually fail because they skip research, overestimate their income, underestimate the risk involved, or rush into deals that they shouldn't take. So what I want to do now is walk you through the process step by step, the way in which a professional operator would think about it. Step 1 is deciding your strategy first. Before you call a single landlord, you need to ask yourself, are you aiming for short stays or rooms? What actually works in the area? And what's your demand? Because a strategy that works in one city can fall flat in another. This is where due diligence and proper market research comes in. You need to be looking at what properties in that area rent for, what type of short-term accommodation are already popular in that area, how saturated the market is, and what rules and regulations apply locally. You're not guessing, you're checking. Step 2, and this is very important, you need to understand the rules and structure. This part is boring, but it matters, and it'll save you a lot of time, money, and headache down the line. Before you take on any unit, you need to understand what's actually allowed in the area that you're looking to take a unit on, what permissions are needed, and how the agreement is actually structured. You can't rent a property on a standard tenancy and then just do whatever you want with it. The paperwork has to match the use, and this is where people get caught out. If the structure isn't clean, just walk away from the deal. Step 3 is find potential properties. Once you know your numbers, you start sourcing the deals. When you're looking for properties, look at properties that are potentially sitting empty for long periods of time, landlords struggling with tenants, or properties that don't quite work as standard lets. You're not looking for perfection, you're looking for a good fit for your company. At this stage, you should have a short list of properties that fit that criteria and have a rough idea of what's actually going to work financially. Step 4, the conversation. This is where most people lose the deal. Positioning matters so much in this part of the deal source. If you ring up and just say, hi, do you allow rent-to-rent? Or, hi, I want to Airbnb your property, you're going to lose people immediately. Instead, you need to explain who you are, what you do, and why it benefits them. You're not selling returns, you're selling certainty, care, and professionalism. And that's what landlords actually care about. They need to be able to trust you in order to give you their property to run as a short-term accommodation. Step 5 is viewings and offers. If there's interest, you view the property. And this is where you slow down. You need to make sure that you double check and go over everything. Is there demand in the area? Do the numbers add up? What's your costs and your layout? And what's the suitability for the business model? Because once you commit, you're on the hook. Confidence here doesn't mean rushing. It means being sure. Step 6 is having the correct contracts and exit plan in place. Every contract between you and the landlord for company let needs to have clear responsibilities, clear terms, and a break clause for if things don't go to plan. And if there's no flexibility at all, or the landlord is pushing back with some of the terms they have in the contract, that's usually a red flag to walk away from the deal. Good deals don't need pressure. Step 7, marketing and systems. Before the keys even land in your hand, you need to be thinking about these things. Your marketing, how you're going to market the property to sell it to guests. Your listing on platforms such as Airbnb and booking.com. What cleaners that you're going to have in place to make sure you have a good turnover system. And what PMS or management systems are you going to be used to make sure everything runs smoothly? The goal is not to create another job. The goal is to have something that runs smoothly without you even being there. If you don't systemize things, you're going to burn out very fast. And I'm saying this from experience. So let's honestly talk about the risk involved. Here's the big ones that most people don't talk about. Taking on a property that you can't fill. Overestimating your demand. Having weak contracts that doesn't have a break clause or benefit you at all. Poor guest screening and no systems in place. The worst situation isn't low profit. It's being stuck paying rent on a property that doesn't perform. That's why due diligence and market research is extremely important. You need to make sure you nail this before you take on any property. So here's the thing, rent-to-rent isn't magic. It's not easy money and it's definitely not for everybody. But when it's done properly with the right structure in place, the right conversations, and the correct systems that doesn't cause you a headache every day, it can be a solid way to generate cash flow without owning a single property. And that's why most people just starting out or interested in getting into property find this business model extremely lucrative. If this video helped, take a second to subscribe to the channel. I break down stuff properly every single week without any hype. And if you have any questions about rent-to-rent or you're stuck on a specific step, drop it in the comments or send me a DM on your Instagram and I'll cover it in a future video. I'll see you in the next video.